It was the middle of the night when the first shot rang out. In a small farmhouse on the Texas plains, a family was fast asleep, completely unaware that a killer was already inside. By the time the sun came up, 3 of them were dead, and 1 young girl was pretending to be. This young girl was just 10 years old, alone in the dark, terrified. But somehow she had the presence of mind to lie perfectly still, play dead, and wait. Then she picked up the phone and called 911. That call would send police rushing to a crime scene they would never forget. And it would mark the beginning of one of the most chilling and heartbreaking criminal investigations in Texas history. This is the story of Robin Doan, a young girl who survived a brutal massacre in her own home. It's a story about fear, loss, and the unthinkable strength of a child who refused to give up. So settle in, and let's begin. Robin Doan lived in a farmhouse just outside Pampa, Texas, a small, quiet town in the Texas Panhandle with a population of around 17,000, the kind of place where doors were left unlocked. Neighbors looked out for one another, and nights were still and peaceful. Robin was 10 years old at the time, a 5th grader who loved animals, especially her pet dogs. Her world was her family, her home, and the open space of Texas. She was cheerful, shy, and a little quiet. She was deeply loved. She lived with her mother, Michelle Conrad. Michelle Conrad was born October 1st, 1969 in Grand Prairie. She was a 1989 graduate of Pampa High School. She worked for Gray Company Farm Bureau for 10 years. She married Brian Conrad on January 17, 2003. She was involved in 4-H Pampa Optimist Club and was a member of Briarwood Full Gospel Church, described by those who knew her as nurturing, kind-hearted, and fiercely protective. Mitchell was the type of mom who made sure everyone had what they needed before thinking of herself. At the time of the murders, she was pregnant with the Conrad's 3rd child, who was named Mickle. Robin's stepfather, Brian Conrad, was born on May 2, 1974, in Abilene. He graduated from Claiborne High School in 1992 and attended Clarendon College, studying farm and ranch management. He later graduated from Oklahoma Panhandle State University with a degree in agriculture. After college, he moved to Pampa to operate the family farm and ranch. He married Michelle Sutterth on January 17, 2003. He had served as a director of Gray Company, Farm Bureau, and was active in 4-H. He was a member of Briarwood Full Gospel Church. He liked to cook, and his wife was the organizer of barbecues with Bureau friends. He wasn't Robin's biological father, but he raised her like his own, and she called him Dad. Then there was Zachary, known to everyone as Zach. He was Robin's 14-year-old brother, teenager full of energy, known for his sense of humor and love of sports. Zach was born on August 20, 1991 in Pampa. He was a freshman student at Pampa High School where he was involved in cross-country, track, and wrestling. He was also active in Pampa Optimist baseball and was a member of the Briarwood Full Gospel Church. He loved to hunt, play golf, and show livestock, received high awards in 4-H for air rifle competition. Zach had recently turned 14 and was enjoying being with his friends. He spent his days playing baseball, track, and air rifle shooting. He loved music and was a member of his gospel church choir. Robin looked up to him. He teased her like big brothers do, but they were close. Their farmhouse sat on a large stretch of land outside town. It was peaceful, the kind of place where the stars at night looked brighter and the silence made you feel safe. That house wasn't just a place to sleep. It was home. Sunday dinners, family movie nights, Zach joking around, Mitchell making breakfast, dogs barking in the yard. For Robin, it was everything she knew. But in the early hours of September 30th, 2005, that home would become the scene of unimaginable violence. Everything that once felt safe would be shattered in an instant. This family, warm, ordinary, and full of love, had no idea that a killer was heading straight for them. No warning, no reason, just the wrong house, at the wrong time, and only one would survive. Robin Doan's life would never be the same. But to understand what happened next, we need to go back to another state and another crime. A man named Levi King had just murdered 2 people in Missouri, and he was on the move. Levi King was just 23 years old in 2005, but his life was already filled with violence, untreated mental illness, and red flags that were repeatedly ignored. He grew up in Pineville, Missouri, a small secluded town in the Ozark Hills. One of 7 children, Levi was raised in a home where drug use, chaos, and neglect were the norm. His father, Scott King, introduced him to alcohol and marijuana at a young age. Rebecca Mitchell, a friend of Levi's sister, recalled once seeing Scott smoking marijuana with his 6-year-old son. Levi's sister, Prairie King, testified that she witnessed her father and a friend doing needle drugs in front of her 7-year-old brother. All of the children except for the oldest, Ben, were encouraged to smoke marijuana. The children were even exposed to methamphetamine. By his teens, Levi had turned to meth and heroin. The King household was not only unstable, it was deadly. Levi's younger brother, Spencer, was just 13 years old when he was accidentally shot and killed by a friend while at home. The gun had been given to them by Scott King. Toxicology reports later showed Spencer had marijuana in his system at the time of his death. Disturbingly, Prairie said that after the funeral, their father made the boys go outside and shoot guns in the yard. He claimed he didn't want them to fear firearms just because their brother had died. His home life was violent and abusive. Scott King was controlling and frequently lashed out at the children. The abuse in the King household was severe. Prairie recalled her father slamming their mother against a wall and holding a gun to her head. He beat the children with his hands and later with a paddle. One instance he beat Prairie until she collapsed, then pulled her back up only to beat her again until he was exhausted. Levi and Prairie were reportedly targeted the most. As a teenager, Levi became known for his cruelty and erratic behavior. He had a disturbing fascination with firearms and a reputation for harming animals. He also developed a growing obsession with death. These tendencies were hardly surprising given the environment he was raised in. Those who knew Levi described him as emotionally detached, withdrawn, and angry. Not only was the home abusive and violent, the King home was described as filthy and unfit for children. Jomar Wilson recalled the first thing he noticed was the grime and decay. There was blackened insulation, unfinished walls, and a display of ceremonial knives and swords. The home was littered with guns, knives, and ammunition, even when there was no food. Levi King's defense attorney said this in response to seeing the home and the state it was in.
Regardless of whether they had food or not, they had money for ammunition.
Levi's uncle described the house as atrocious, saying he would never let his family stay there, not even for a night. There was often no running water, no working bathroom, and no privacy. The children's sleeping space was one large room with beds lined up like in an orphanage. The bathroom lacked plumbing, and the stairs were unfinished with no railing. Despite the deeply dysfunctional home, Levi's struggles were visible outside it as well. He had been in and out of psychiatric care, and was diagnosed with depression and behavioral disorders. He was prescribed medication but rarely took it consistently. He also began racking up legal trouble, petty thefts, burglary, and weapons charges. In 2004, he was sentenced to prison for burglary and unlawful possession of a firearm. By 2005, he was out. Aimless, angry, and spiraling out of control. On the night of September 29, 2005, Levi King broke into the home of 70-year-old Orly McCool in Pineville. Orly had once allowed Levi's father to store tools on his property, but that kindness didn't spare him. That night, Levi shot Orly dead without warning.
Waited. I already had it in mind what I was going to do. Don McCool came in first, went down into the living room. Orly McCool, whenever I heard him coming in the front door, I stepped out of his office, started walking towards him, at which point he caught sight of me. But before he ever even had time to respond, I leveled off the firearm and opened fire. I shot him in the left temple, and he dropped.
Doan stops at the bottom.
Then he turned the gun on Orly's 47-year-old daughter, Dawn.
My view of her body was obstructed by a pillar and cross beams. All I could really see was her left leg. The first shot that I did into her hip that caused her to fall over, at which point I opened fire and continued to fire upon her until I saw no more signs of life.
The killings were fast and cold. Levi didn't steal anything, simply killed them both, then got into Orly's car and drove off. Didn't stop. He didn't try to hide the evidence. He didn't look back. Over the next 24 hours, Levi drove nearly 600 miles across 3 states, from Missouri through Oklahoma and into the Texas Panhandle. He had no plan, no destination, just a car, a gun, and a willingness to kill again. At around 3 a.m. on September 30th, 2005, Levi arrived at the remote farmhouse of the Conrad family, also known as the Doan home. He had no connection to them, didn't know them. But their house was isolated, dark and vulnerable. It's exactly what Levi King was looking for. Inside the home were for sleeping people. 3 of them would not survive the next 10 minutes. The 4th, a 10-year-old girl named Robin Doan, would wake up to a nightmare that would haunt her for the rest of her life. What happened next was fast, violent, and horrifying. Levi King entered the home, unannounced and fully armed, ready to kill again. Levi King entered through the back door after breaking it down. He didn't sneak, he didn't hesitate, carried his AK-47, loaded and ready. He walked down the hallway and into the master bedroom, where Brian and Mitchell Conrad were sleeping. Hearing this commotion, Michelle woke up. Levi raised the weapon and fired. She began to scream and tried to shield herself, but Levi kept shooting. Michelle was shot a total of 5 times. He raised the rifle and fired at Brian Conrad, died instantly. Then killed Molly, the family's dog.
I circled back. I turned around and came back. Took an AK-47 from the arsenal that was in the back of the truck. Came to the back door and kicked it in. Immediately off to my left, noticed a bedroom and saw 2 people in the bed. She woke up first, so I leveled off the rifle and opened fire. After firing several rounds into her, I turned the weapon on him and continued firing.
The sound of the gunshots tore through the stillness of the house. From her bedroom, Robin Doan woke up. She thought it was a thunderstorm at first. She says, "That night I was having a nightmare, and I remember hearing gunshots in my dream. But when I woke up, it didn't end. The gunshots were actually going off in my house. My mother started screaming and screaming and screaming."
That night, I was having a nightmare, and I remember hearing the gunshots in my dream. But when I woke up, it didn't end. The gunshots were actually going off in my house. My mother started screaming and screaming and screaming.
After hearing these screams, Robin jumped out of her bed and crouched down by her door. Seconds later, she heard footsteps, and as these footsteps approached, She ran and quickly jumped back into her bed. When King entered the room, Robin was lying still in bed, terrified, holding her breath. She kept her eyes shut as he stood in the doorway. He raised the gun and fired twice, one of them grazing her left leg and the other grazing her left arm.
I jumped out of my bed and I went and crouched down by my door. That's when I had heard footsteps. It was very loud. He was stomping. I just remember popping up as fast as I could and just taking 2 leaps back into my bed and just freezing. He fired 2 rounds off at me. I had one of them graze my left leg and my left arm.
The shots missed. One of the bullets hit the little drawer next to her bed. Whether he thought he hit her or whether he didn't care, King turned and walked away. That's when King entered Zach's bedroom, Robin's 14-year-old brother. Zach was in bed asleep and never had a chance to react before King opened fire and shot Zach in the head. He never woke up. 3 people, gone in minutes. Robin didn't move for a long time. Minutes passed. She couldn't be sure if he was gone. She didn't hear anything. No more footsteps, no voices, just silence. Horrifying, unnatural silence. After lying there for 2 hours, Robin eventually got up. She recalls this moment later saying, "I played dead for 2.5 hours. I was like, I can't just lay here. I need to do something." And so I just proceeded out the door and started dialing 911.
I played dead for 2.5 hours. I was just like, I can't just lay here. I need to do something. So I just proceeded out the door and started dialing 911.
At 6:15 a.m., Robin found a phone and dialed 911.
Ma'am, there was a shootout in my house. I don't know who's alive in my house, and I'm scared.
Where are you at?
7142 Highway 70. It's about 13.3 miles out from the bowling alley.
What's your name?
Robin Doan, my parents, Michelle Conrad and Brian Conrad. I'm scared after this, and I don't know what
Robin
to do.
Doan?
Yes, ma'am. I
Brian
know
Conrad.
my mom is alive.
Okay, I'll stay on with you. I've got the ambulance and the fire department to come too, okay?
Thank you so much.
They're coming. Stay there. You don't see any other vehicles or strange people around your home or anything?
No, ma'am.
You didn't see a car drive off of any kind?
No, ma'am.
You just heard the shots fired?
And I saw the lights on in the kitchen, so I'm assuming they stole some stuff.
Okay, okay.
I can't believe it.
Okay.
And all I want right now is my blanket and my pillow. I'm scared.
I know you are.
I'm scared.
I
I'm
know.
cold.
I know. Just stay right there. Okay, he's there.
I hear more sirens.
Yes, they're coming. I've got the ambulance and the fire coming for you. Okay.
I want my mom.
I know you do. I know. There?
Yeah, I see another police car.
Okay, that's Dennis. That's Deputy Elliott that's going to be there with you, okay?
Okay.
Robin, only 10 years old, managed to stay calm enough to give her address. She told the dispatcher what happened, that a man had come in during the night, that she'd heard gunshots, that she had played dead to survive. She begged them to hurry. When deputies arrived, they found Robin waiting outside, barefoot, in her pajamas, covered in blood that wasn't hers. Inside the house, police surveyed the horrific scene. Michelle, Brian, and Zach were all dead. It was a massacre. Robin was the only survivor. Robin described the man she'd seen briefly in the hallway. She described the gun, the sounds, the horror. Even after enduring such a horrific event, Robin remained clear-headed enough to tell the police exactly what had happened.
She ran straight to me. I hugged her. As distraught as she was, she's very articulate, just telling me in absolute detail what was going on and what she heard and everything.
But what no one knew at that moment was that the man responsible had already left town. He was still driving, still armed, still dangerous, and they had no idea who he was. The Texas Rangers and Gray County Sheriff's Office launched a massive investigation. They locked down the crime scene and began collecting evidence. Bullet casings, footprints, and tire tracks. Robin told them what she could. The man was tall, white, with short hair. He had a long gun. He didn't say a word.
I don't know this for sure, but I thought I saw a white eyes, white face. Okay.
It wasn't much to go on, and they had no immediate suspects. So the leads dried from there. For weeks, the Conrads' case grew cold. They had no suspects, and Robin was terrified that the killer was going to come back for her. The community was also scared. With the motive being unclear and the killer out on the loose, people were terrified that they could be next. In one article posted by My Plainview on October 14, 2005, before Levi King was connected to the crime, it said this: "Some who live near the Conrad house have had new locks put on their doors, and some are for the first time locking theirs. One rancher has purchased a motion sensor. People were extremely anxious the first few days after the shootings, but are still wary because there's so little information available," residents said. Even relatives aren't being told about the investigation, some said. End quote. Some residents contemplated that the motive might have something to do with whether the murders were retaliation for Brian Conrad reporting the theft from his farm of some ammonia, which he used for fertilizer. Ammonia is an ingredient used to make methamphetamine, and most of the Panhandle 30 counties have a problem with meth manufacturing and trafficking. Ammonia thefts from farms in the region are substantial. An investigator said he has heard 6 different variations of the ammonia rumor. One of the investigators on the case said, "The Texas Rangers, investigative arm of the DPS that is handling the investigation, has also looked into those reports. I've had the Rangers confirm none of them." End quote. After this theory, no more motives were put forward. Police kept asking themselves, who would want this family described as salt of the earth dead? From talking to friends, family, and the community, it was clear that the family was very loved. It was a senseless crime. No enemies were found from their investigation, and the crime scene did not show signs of this being a burglary gone wrong. Nothing was missing. Valuables were still in the house. At the time of the murders, a Texas Department of Public Safety spokesperson said robbery is not considered a motive and the young girl is not suspected. People identified as suspects early on have been cleared, and other persons of interest are being questioned. While they did have the bullet casings, footprints, and tire tracks, they did not have DNA. No DNA, no fingerprints, and no clue as to why this happened. Meanwhile, in McDonald County, Missouri, police were investigating what they believed was an entirely separate crime. Earlier that same day, 2 bodies had been discovered: 70-year-old Orly McCool and his 47-year-old daughter-in-law, Dawn McCool. Both had been shot to death in their home. Investigators found shell casings at the scene. These were unusual Russian ammunition, not typically sold in local stores. That detail triggered a memory for a deputy. Just the night before, Levi King's father had reported a break-in.
One of the other deputies there that does a lot of the crime scenes and said, "I just took a burglar report from the night before from Scott King, just lives down the road." Well, Mr. King had reported that his son Levi had come into the house while he was gone and broke into his gun safe and stole several guns. And some of the ammo was the same kind.
Levi had stolen several firearms and matching ammunition from his father's gun safe. When authorities realized that the missing guns and ammo matched what was found at the McCool crime scene, Levi King became their prime suspect. The McCool's Dodge Dakota pickup truck was also missing, and law enforcement believed King had used it to flee the state. A nationwide alert was issued. On October 2, 2005, just 2 days after the Texas murders, Levi King was found in the stolen truck near the Mexican border by Border Patrol agents in El Paso, Texas. He admitted to having guns in the back seat, which immediately raised suspicions. When officers ran the tags, they discovered the vehicle was stolen, and King was a suspect in a double homicide. He was quickly taken into custody and questioned.
Before I even realized it, I had just pointed it at him and fired.
How many times did you fire?
Just once. He spun and fell over.
You walk by to the door and you see this woman. Why, explain to me why you shot at her.
I was scared. I didn't know what was gonna happen to me. I was panicked.
15 minutes into the interview, Levi King calmly confessed to killing Orly and Don McCool, said he acted impulsively, firing at Orly without thinking, and panicking and shooting Don. He showed no emotion and gave no clear motive. Missouri detectives traveled to El Paso to retrieve him. During a conversation, King told a detective that even hours later, he could still smell the gunpowder, the sweat, and the blood at the McCool crime scene. He then disgustingly added that the smell was better than any drug he had ever experienced. While being held in jail, King made an unexpected confession. 2 weeks later, he asked to speak with the detective on the McCool case. When the detective arrived, King said, there's 4 more in Texas? At first, authorities were wary. He had already been in custody for nearly 2 weeks. Why confess now? Especially since, at that point, authorities had not yet linked him to the Texas murders. King then told the detective where the murders had occurred, describing a location near a giant cross. That chilling detail prompted Missouri authorities to contact the Texas Panhandle. They described the landmark, and local investigators quickly realized it matched the scene of an unsolved triple homicide, the murders of the Conrad family in Pampa, Texas. Texas authorities began piecing the case together. Here's what they learned. After murdering the McCools, King stole Orly McCool's vehicle and drove through Oklahoma. He exited Interstate 40 at random and pulled into the Conrad property. There he murdered Brian Conrad, Michelle Conrad, and 14-year-old Zach Doan. He also shot 10-year-old Robin Doan, believing she was dead. King then continued south toward the Mexican border until he was apprehended. Once Texas authorities were notified of his arrest, they quickly connected the dots. During further questioning, Levi King confessed to all 5 murders, the 2 in Missouri and the 3 in Texas. He said he picked the Texas house at random. He didn't know the Conrads. As for Robin, he said he thought she was already dead. But justice would prove to be its own battle. Although Levi King had confessed, both Texas and Missouri had to decide if they should pursue the death penalty. After confessing to 5 brutal murders, Levi King sat in a Texas jail. But what came next wasn't immediate justice. It was navigating plea deals and whether to prosecute the death penalty. In Missouri, he'd murdered a father and daughter. In Texas, he'd slaughtered an entire family, leaving only 1 child alive. Ultimately, Missouri offered a plea deal. He agreed to plead guilty to the murders in Missouri. In exchange for taking the death penalty off the table, he would receive 2 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. And although King was also pleading guilty in Texas for those 3 murders, Texas refused to take the death penalty off the table. Former prosecutor Lynn Switzer said, "If there was ever a case where a man deserved to die, it was Levi King." For years after the Don Conrad murders, the sentencing trial for Levi King began. The defense didn't dispute that King was guilty. He had confessed in detail. They were tasked with the job of convincing 12 jurors to not give Levi the death penalty, but to allow him to live out his sentences in Missouri for the rest of his life. His lawyers knew they had to convince the jury that Levi King was not a killing entity, and that he was not just a monster, and that he was a human being as well. They argued that he had mental health issues. He had struggled with bipolar disorder at least since he was a teen and been diagnosed with depression multiple times in his life. He had also at one point had a schizophrenia diagnosis.
A monster into a human being.
Are you Levi Alexis King?
Yes, sir, I am.
Levi had been bipolar at least since adolescence. At varying times, he had other diagnoses.
They went into detail about his home life and the abuse of his father. Defense witnesses such as his sister's friend, and his uncle came to testify about the horrific abuse he had endured as a child up until his teenage years. They showed the videos of the environment Levi lived in, emphasizing the weapons everywhere and Scott King's Levi's father, obsession with violence. In response to this, the prosecutor Lynn Switzer had this to say: "The defense did a very good job to paint Levi as this poor, pathetic, mistreated, sad little person. But there's a whole lot of other people in this world that have grown up in the same environment that Levi did. Or even worse than Levi did, and they don't go around on a killing spree. Levi King kills people because he likes the smell of blood, kills people because he likes the smell of gun smoke, doesn't care. For the prosecution, one person stood at the center of it all, Robin Doan. By the time the trial began, Robin was 14 years old. Robin did not want to testify out of fear, but knew she needed to. Her family was no longer here to speak for themselves, so she had to get on that stand to speak for them. When she took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. With her voice steady but full of emotion, Robin described waking up to the sound of gunfire. She told them how she played dead, how the man came into her room, how she felt the bullet rip into her pillow. She said, "I thought if I moved, he would shoot me again, so I didn't move. I just laid there." She was calm, clear, and brave. During her testimony, she tried not to look at King, but eventually she did. She described looking at him, saying, "The stare he was giving me was the worst feeling of my life. He is very cold, he is very blank, and essentially it felt like he was staring a hole right through me, Her testimony was emotional and hard to listen to. Prosecutor Lynn Switzer emphasized the impact of Robin's testimony, stating, "The hard part about Robin testifying was to see the pain that precious little girl had to go through and endure." On October 6, 2009, the jury delivered its decision after 8 hours of deliberation. Levi King was found guilty of 3 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and did not receive the death penalty. It was actually one juror that decided that fate for Levi, as the other jurors did want to initially give him the death penalty. According to jury foreman Tommy Jones, majority of jurors supported the death penalty, but at least one juror was firmly opposed. Leading to a life sentence without parole, even King's defense attorney credits this decision to the holdout of that one juror. It is crazy to think that Levi King is a person that killed 5 people on a whim. No motive, no rhyme or reason, and no thought behind the consequences of his horrific actions, received compassion. Compassion that he did not give to his victims. He did not hesitate giving 5 undeserving good people death. But one person, who had heard the devastating things Levi did while on his killing spree, spared him of that same sentence he delivered to 5 others. Later, Levi King was extradited to Missouri, where he will never walk free. His sentences in both Texas and Missouri ensure that he will spend the rest of his life in prison, providing a measure of justice for the victims and their families. After the verdict, the Conrad family shared their thoughts. Brian's mother, Sharon Conrad, expressed that there is no such thing as closure. She said the trial was just another phase in our lives that we had to get through. It's torn us all apart. Part of us is gone, and we will never be the same, she continued. We respect the decision of the jury, and I appreciate their hard work. We came into this totally prepared to accept whatever happened. It's just part of the process. Gray County District Attorney Lynn Switzer also spoke, saying, "If it were up to me, or a defense team, or a judge to make that decision, we wouldn't have the system we have. The people of Lubbock County have spoken," she added. "He will be held accountable for his crimes. He's going to serve every day of his life in prison. Ultimately, we are gratified, but there are no winners." King's defense attorney Maxwell Peck commented, "He's going to serve every day of his life in prison for the rest of his natural life. Ultimately, we are gratified, but there are no winners." Through tears, Robin Doan, the lone survivor of the attack, shared how she is haunted by her mother's scream and still feels paranoid when trying to sleep. She told King that she forgives him and expressed her hope that one day when he meets God, he will ask for forgiveness too. "If I held on to all the hatred," she later said, "it would just tear me apart. Forgiveness was for me, not for him." She went on to explain that forgiving him gave her a sense of peace. Robin Doan has worked hard not to see herself as a victim, but the trauma she experienced still lingers. Despite her strength, the fear and pain from that night remain very real for her. She struggles with recurring nightmares, intrusive memories, and a heightened sense of paranoia, especially when alone.
I am very superstitious, I guess. The day that everything happened, I had on socks and I had on long sleeves and long pants. I will not sleep in long sleeves, long pants, or socks now. I will not sleep with my door open because I feel like there's a figure of a person standing in my doorway. I'm scared of the dark. when I walk into the house and I know that I'm there by myself, I will go through every single nook and cranny in the house to make sure that there's no one in there.
Robin often finds herself revisiting thoughts like, what if I could have done this differently? Struggles with being alone in the dark, checking every part of the house when she's home by herself. Significant dates like birthdays are especially difficult, as they remind her of the family members she lost. Robin briefly tried counseling, but didn't find it helpful. Feeling that she didn't need a therapist to tell her how to feel, instead, she leans on family and close relationships for support. Her bond with law enforcement, particularly the officers involved in her case, has been important for her healing. After the trial, the law enforcement community raised funds to start a scholarship program for Robin, and many officers, including former Sheriff Gary Henderson, have stayed in touch over the years, offering support. Although the trauma continues to affect her, Robin refuses to let it define her. She remained active in sports, including basketball, volleyball, and cheerleading, and has a strong, positive outlook on life. Those close to her, including her what Robin calls her adopted mother Denise Mackey, believe Robin has a big heart and is meant to help others, suggesting that her future lies in a caring profession. As for Levi King, he is incarcerated at the Eastern Reception, Diagnostic and Correctional Center in Bon Terre, Missouri, a maximum security facility that houses inmates serving life sentences and also contains Missouri's execution chamber. Following his sentencing in 2009, King was transferred to this facility due to concerns over his behavior and potential escape plans. While specific details about his current status are limited, ERDCC is known for its strict security measures and programs aimed at inmate rehabilitation. While incarcerated, Levi King participated in a few interviews. When asked why he committed the 5 murders, he described it as a kind of high. He said he felt a sense of peace after killing Orly and Dawn McCool. When that feeling faded, he continued his rampage by murdering Michelle, Zach, and Robin Doan. As of now, there have been no recent public updates regarding King's incarceration. He remains in custody, serving multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. Thank you so much for watching and for taking the time to remember the victims and the incredible strength of those who survived the unimaginable. If you'd like to see more stories that focus on survivor cases where courage and resilience rise from tragedy, please let me know by commenting A in the comments below. These stories can be heavy, but they matter. They remind us of the human spirit and the will to keep going. If this one touched you, I hope you'll consider subscribing, sharing, or simply holding space for the victims and survivors in your thoughts. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, take care of yourself and each other.